Hi, this is Frequency Bones from a Music Connection 12, Music in the Natural Worlds, Video 2. And Video 2 is going to be called In the Feeling Life. Our first video in this series of Music in the Natural Worlds was about being out of the box of our house or apartment, whatever our living quarters are. There's a lot of squares around. And to be outside, you're free from that confinement and what that confinement actually does to you. Okay? So, what you just heard, that articulation exercise, I'm calling it the Dragonfly Wing Articulation. Because I was watching this dragonfly on one of the walks Dr. V and I were on. And how, when it closed its wings, it went. Right after it landed, it would go through this very sequenced, quite rhythmic, but not metronomically rhythmical. And yet it had its own definition and accuracy within it. Because it obviously had to do with some mechanical, natural action that has to do with the dragonfly, this particular type anyway, of how it relaxes its wings once it's landed and in a stationary position. So I thought, wow, that had so much articulation. It was so defined. It had rhythm. But not kind that you could just set a metronome to and really do it out. You could try by writing it out, writing it out like someone seeing that rhythm, and then they take dictation and write it down in musical rests and notes and time values. But without the experience of being with that living life in the environment that I saw it in, it's going to sound skeletal. It's going to sound synthetic. Not something really of the natural worlds in this way, even though the mechanism itself was really extraordinary to witness. And so in this Music in the Natural Worlds, we're taking trying to get the lighting here. I thought I had it and then it shifted. In this Music in the Natural World series, we're trying to take these experiences of nature and actually build connections to them. And in this way, more of that life you're communing with, whether it's a plant, whether it's an insect, whether it's an animal, whether it's water, whether it's air, whether it's the different temperature or season or time of day, you will have a bank of experiential knowledge that you can move and put into your art. Whether it's dancing, whether it's music, whether it's carpentry, no matter what it is, a relationship with nature, I think, is very healthy for a lot of reasons. Okay? The other day, I saw a disturbing video which triggered so many things in me. And it was about all of the species. Well, not all, that list would be huge, but a very big list with videos of species that have been extinct in the last few years. It's just seeing it that way, and I've had this feeling before, that the human needs to go through a lot of healing, a lot of admission, a lot of coming to grips with the pains and suffering it's caused this planet and all of its life forms. Whether it's human, animal, fish, insects, the air, the water, all of our elements. It's so important, and that's one of the reasons for this Frequency Bond Summer Music Connection 12. Is so perhaps it'll be an encouragement and an inspiration for people to not only deepen their art, but deepen themselves with their relationship with natural things that aren't human-made. And so seeing this dragonfly, I say, oh, I'm going to try that articulation. I have a new articulation and rhythm. And to finish up what I was saying, because it's important to say, there's obviously a lot of reckoning for the white people of the world and white people of the United States to come to grips with the suffering we've caused our fellow African Americans for hundreds of years. And they march about it, shout about it, scream about it, and it still wants to linger. I would hope that my African American friends of mine know that I stand with you in your cause, as well as Dr. V does, as its own specific circumstance to be dealt with face to face. And so I personally feel that the closer the human being can get to having a deep respect and reverence for all of life will help move us beyond this division. Because if you look at division from a natural world standpoint, well, we live in duality. Duality in terms of looking at the creation, looking at life on the planet, is immense. Duality in a bigger sense means variety. Look at how many different kinds of ants there are. You know, until you know squirrels, you'll always say, oh, yeah, squirrels are playing, the squirrels are playing, and aren't they cute and all this stuff. But until you start to know individual ones, you'll realize they're all different, even though they're all called squirrels. The same thing with, we've had many different kinds of birds before. Not one parrot is the same, even of the same species. And so if we develop a care about an herb, a tree, our air. Not only will it link us to being more natural in ourselves, but we'll be able to sing that song of life and its variety. And I believe if we can at least get there, and having that as a fundamental attitude and place in our hearts and consciousness, it's going to put an end to this suffering for all life here. And each one, like the circumstance right now in the country, has been brought to such a head with our African American brothers and sisters. Each one needs to be dealt with on its own terms and on its own circumstance. So I'm saying a very broad situation, loving all of life, will help the individual situations. Absolutely. But given there's been so much pain, each individual situation needs to be addressed. So, music in the natural worlds is so vital. And looking at, now just for a moment, looking at the different places on this planet Earth, the flora and the fauna are totally different. And so the humans born in different climates, in different regions, in different temperate zones, are going to be different. Because nature is pure intelligence. Therefore, that which needs to be in a certain climate, in a certain place to be able to live there, is designed for that purpose. So, moving into having the connections with nature that we have, we'll be able to put it into our art, like this Dragonfly Articulation, and that unusual rhythm that once you build a relationship, you'll be able to feel. If you can get inside of what is it like, even a little bit, to be that dragonfly with a body like that. Notice how articulated a lot of insect-shaped is. Articulation meaning very defined, vivid definition. But we know, as musicians and wind players, if we say articulations, it doesn't just have to be wind players, obviously. Pianos have articulation, string players have articulation, vocalists, of course, have articulation. That there's different kinds. And so here I'm walking around in one of these walks and I see, oh, look at this pin oak leaf. Very defined, almost jagged, but some quasi-symmetrical cutout shapes with points. Okay? It makes you feel, you stand up straight a little bit and, it's a little more active, even the way that it looks. Okay? And then found a, there's another, maybe it's a white oak. I think is what it's called. And that was very, very rounded leaves. Still had an oak type feeling, but it was very different and very rounded. So instead of just having a stock idea of what a round articulation is, I have another reference I can bring to round by saying, well, what kind? And last night, Dr. V and I were walking near this creek that we go to. It's a very special place for us. It's very healing, and we commune with the life there. Commune with the life there. And I was looking at these beautiful hemlock trees, and some of them were young. And in the mist, because this was dusk, so things were getting dark in the forest. It's such a thick time of year right now, and there's been so much rain, and so everything looks like just gargantuan. You know, the leaves are just, wow, so full. But the new growth in these hemlock trees look like little lights outlining the shapes of the bunch of needles, of these little heads, of these sections. And it would make this drawing all the way around like this. Again, the articulation was made up of not only the shape of those leaves, and they're not really leaves, they're like pins, you know, when you're talking about conifers, any kind of pines. Even though they all have different textures. Some are softer. The hemlock is a softer variety. The white pine is more, to the touch, is sharper. Sharp. And these lights caught me because it reminded me of articulation, like I was saying again, because of its definition. And not only its definition, but its color. So its timbre, because it had this hue of yellow going around in the midst of things getting darker because it was night, it lit up an outline like a natural little Christmas tree in a way. And it had its own rhythm. So all of a sudden here I'm talking about articulation, and it actually had its own pitch. You couldn't hear it with your usual hearing, but the vibe that you got from it, you certainly could feel a pitch in what it did to you. There was a softness and a liveliness and a lightness and a pattern of rhythm. And so there's many things from that walk I can take back and put into my art by building these connections. The stream, the creek, rather, was very, very calm. Very, very, very calm, because there was no wind, or very little. And but it still moved. It still moved. So I hope you're enjoying your walks and still in the feeling life of what's going on. And all the musical terms that we have in us eventually will start to come to the surface and go, wow, that rhythm and articulation and tone timbre, they can be very related, can't they? Because something will change the timbre of the sound if the articulation gets more enunciated. All things are in all things, as a great mentor of mine said. So let's be mindful and have some good deep reflection of how we can be greater stewards of nature and to all of humanity.